Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Thursday evening. A good looking day here in my neck of the woods. We had temperatures up in the 70s today, sunshine, a few clouds, and we're going to do it one more time on Friday before we start some changes. So we're going to be looking forward to some cooler air this weekend. Pattern looks to go up and down a little bit here in the east, but a lot of the activity right now is out in the west, and I think that's where we're going to start tonight. We're going to go out west and look at what's happening in the western U.S. because we have all the energy in the upper atmosphere getting spent there with the trough off the west coast and a bit of a ridge here in the east, keeping things rather quiet. And in fact, it's rather cold and snowy throughout much of the Pacific Northwest. There might even be a few flakes of snow tonight in the low areas in northwestern Washington near Seattle, believe it or not, although it's not going to amount to much there. But even in some places not that far, at elevations of 200-300 feet or higher, there will probably be the beginnings of some accumulation. You can see the rotation here of a storm that's dropping southward along the western coast of Canada, right near the Canadian border with the state of Washington, and it's pulling in a lot of Pacific moisture. We also have quite a bit of cold air that's coming down out of Canada. The snow cover growth in Canada, by the way, has been fairly strong this month, so cold air has been building up in Canada. Some of that, of course, bleeding into the western part of the United States because that's where the deep trough is. Now, you see a lot of clouds across Montana, Idaho, northern Wyoming, back into the Dakotas. This is all translating at the moment to some snow and some ice as well in some places where there are some pockets of warm air. And we're going to take a look at just how much snow, at least from the standpoint of the GFS, and even the European, pretty much kind of lines up this way. So we're going to start tonight with the snowfall forecast map. I'm trying to make myself get into this habit of making sure that we look at this particular map on a regular basis, on a daily basis now, just kind of getting out of the summertime mode and going into more of a wintertime mode. So let me just make this a bit bigger so you can follow it along. And we're going to put down the model's snow for the next 36 hours, and here we go. We'll go to 36 hours, which is 2 a.m. Saturday. And you can see that the snowfall is fairly substantial across much of the Northwest, and again, even some pockets not too far from the coast, but there's every bit of here's the scale on the side. So when you start to get into the greens, which kind of show up in a couple of dots, I guess, to the highest peaks, you're talking about a foot plus. But there are going to be areas of 6 to 12 inches of snow across parts of Oregon, on up through Montana, northern Wyoming, and northwestern Colorado, and then again also up into northernmost Washington. And as we move out, we'll go out to 72 hours, and you can see the snow increases, and out to 120 hours. So that's over the next 5 days. So this is a fair amount of snow that falls in the western United States. And of course, by contrast, if we switch to the east now and show you what you can expect in the east, there really isn't very much. There is some snow being indicated up through the Dakotas and up through Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, mostly on the light side, nothing major, and some light amounts in the southeastern Canada. And then, of course, you also have a little bit of patchy snows up in northern New England when we get into the next warm front, cold front combination that's going to be moving through. But on the whole, this is certainly a western U.S. affair. So why don't we take a look at what's going on weather-wise? Let's go back to the west, okay, and look at the surface map. We'll start from the beginning. And here's our system that you saw on the satellite there, dropping southward off the coast of Washington by 8 o'clock tonight. And then it just sort of translates its way further south. You start to spread that rain down into northern and central California, which is good news for the dry areas there. And you notice the isobars here with low pressure in western Wyoming. You've got basically easterly isobars, easterly winds across the Dakotas, Montana, on up, and they turn northeasterly over through Oregon and Washington. So this is a fairly cold flow of air that we're dealing with here in the west. And that's how you get it to snow out in the west. You got to get that cold air to come down and bleed basically along and west of the Rockies, and it is doing it. And as we move forward through time, you can see another system makes its way into the Pacific Northwest on Sunday with some rain and snow, and then that gradually diminishes. And moving further into the long range, day 5 and day 6, looks like we've got something off the coast at this point, because as we move into next week, we are going to see the upper air pattern change quite a bit. Now back to the east, I'm going to be jumping around back and forth here, so let's go back to the east. I just saw something that was kind of bizarre, so we'll get to it and we'll see why it doesn't. But here we go. So here's our front for Friday that brings down a high pressure into southeastern Canada, so we're going to get chilly on Saturday down into the mid-Atlantic states. Then here comes the next warm front with showers on Sunday. So we're back up into the 70s on Monday, to be followed by the next cold front that comes through here Monday night. Now that front is only going to make it so far south. There is going to be a bit of a wave that develops, and I don't know why it did this, but because there's colder air coming in behind it, it actually shows a stripe of snow Tuesday night in parts of northern Pennsylvania. The wave is weak and goes out to the east. You know, I'm suspect when I see stuff like this, so I'm not really at all enthused by it. We do have this weak wave, and that's all it is. This is a change, by the way, from a number of model runs in a row, which was showing a much more robust system coming into the eastern part of the U.S. And one of the reasons why things have changed considerably is the structure of the upper air, which is not what it was from a couple of days ago. It's got a much more benign upper air pattern. In fact, it's gone from actually showing a very definable system in the flow, a very pronounced and obvious shortwave trough, to a much weaker shortwave trough. You could barely pick it out. I mean, it is there. When you look at Wednesday morning, its axis from the St. Lawrence River Valley southwestward into Indiana, but it's very weak. You've got this upper high that's sitting down south of Texas, so you know, the flow is kind of flat here. So I'm not sure what you're going to get out of this, other than some rain or showers on Tuesday. You are going to get colder overall, I think, when we look at the long range pattern. I'll put the North America view up, and you can see the upper air with this. Now there is, you know, when we look at the middle part of next week, you know, we do have this vortex, this complex vortex setting up in northern Canada. So we do have a bit of a flow. We have a fairly strong flow from northern Canada, southeast across the northern Great Lakes into upstate New York and New England. So I mean, this certainly would suggest that some colder air will be coming into play. And all the models are kind of on the same page with this. I'm going to just show you the European. The European today with the jet stream actually has a much colder look to it. It would suggest to me that, you know, particularly when we look at, you know, at the end of next week, this is so much different than what the GFS had from earlier. This is, and I'll show you the comparison here in a second. The European has a ridge building up the Rockies into the Pacific Northwest, so it has a cold flow and a broad trough, but a cold trough with cold air that would bring down cold air from Canada into the Great Lakes and Northeast. It would certainly suggest that after Monday, temperatures are going to be near or below average for a good chunk, if not all, of the rest of the work week next week and into the start of next weekend. The last run of the GFS, however, told a slightly different story regarding that, and I'll back up one run. And this is for the, I'm sorry, that was the European at 216. So that was the, let me just back this up. So here's 192 hours. So this is Friday morning, and I'm going to go back one run of the GFS and show you for the same time frame. All right, so is it going to let me change or not? There we go. So here's the GFS at 138 hours. You can see the flow is more west to east across Canada and more west to east across the United States. So it certainly would suggest that it would initially get a cold shot. But I want to get that prior run up. And then you can see the comparison between what the European was doing and what the GFS. So this is the old GFS at 192 hours. So this is next Friday. Now, notice the flow is west to east here. It's across the Pacific into the west. There's some trough. There's a system that's here moving into the Rockies. A little bit of a ridge here in the middle of the country and a little bit of gentle troughing in the east. But the general flow is fairly flat and west to east. The flow across Canada is west to east. Now, for the same time frame, this is what the European has. And you can see the huge difference. I mean, this is monumental. This certainly would suggest that it would be fairly chilly through the rest of the week and going into next weekend until this trough in the east, this upper vortex in Canada, either pulls out or weakens. The European eventually does pull it out, but it still has it on the chilly side even going into day 10. The GFS does not do that at all. It is really just flat, and it would just suggest it might be cold for a couple of days, and then temperatures would moderate. It wouldn't get especially warm, but it would moderate. Either model, whichever one we use and whichever one we look at with regards to an outcome here, you're going to have one common thread, and that, to me, that would seem to be that there is no threat for any kind of major storm going forward. In fact, you know what, let me bring this back up. Let's look at the precip. Let's look at the snow on the GFS. We'll go out 10 days, and then I'm going to switch over and look at Europe, as we've been doing that on a daily basis to see what's going on over there. So here's the total snowfall on the GFS. This is out now through Wednesday. We're not out far enough on the new run, so we only go out to Wednesday evening. You can see across southern Canada, ample snowfall. You know, not a lot. Most of those amounts are under 6 inches. Looks like the bigger snows are going to be in the Intermountain West, particularly the Northwest. As we go back one run, so I can take you a bit further, and you can see the snowfall here going out through the 10-day period. Most of the snowfall is, again, along the Canadian border, and then because of the troughing in the west, you've got snows here from the plains, the northern plains, back over through the northern Rockies and up into the Pacific Northwest. So that would make sense given what we're seeing. Now, as far as rainfall is concerned through the 10-day period, we'll take a look here and show you that the amounts are, you know, the whitish areas are 2 inch plus, the whites to purple of 2 to 3 inches. So this is over the next 10 days. You can see that coastal areas in the Northeast generally under a couple of inches. Precipitation is a bit more substantial across central and northern California and up the Pacific Northwest coast. But with the absence of a major storm here having impact, you're not going to see, you know, too much happening with regards to rain or snow in either direction, except again for what we're getting in the short term in the Northwest. So now let's all go across the pond. And where is Europe? There we go. So here's our rainfall map for Europe over the next 10 days, and it's actually, you know, it's fairly substantial. This is in millimeters for the rainfall, and you know, up to 175 millimeters across the Alps and through much of the I'm guessing this is the old. I'm trying to remember my geography here. Because there's Italy, so Albania, the old Yugoslavia, so that would be Slovenia, and I got to get my map out. It's been a long time. You know, I used to be really good. I know what most of these countries are, but you know, things have changed when I was a kid, when it was just, you know, Czechoslovakia, not, you know, the Czech Republic and the splits. But time to open the map book again as far as the nations are concerned. I apologize for that. France, I know. Spain, I know. Portugal, Ireland, England, Scotland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, etc. And Poland, the Ukraine, those I know. I just got to review the other ones. Okay, so let me put the surface map up, and we'll take a look here at what's happening. And starting from today, so notice, you got low pressure that's sitting east of Portugal. Otherwise, it's just pretty much a general westerly flow off the Atlantic into Europe. You've got some rainy weather coming this Friday night and Saturday into the British Isles, and it looks like it lasts into a part of Sunday before it just goes to sort of scattered showers. Stronger front approaches early next week. In the meantime, we've got a storm that is down in the Mediterranean. So let me just back this up a little bit. So we do have low pressure that develops, and it looks like a fairly strong storm system that moves across northern Italy with some heavy snows in the Italian and Swiss Alps, and then the low reforms in the Mediterranean Sea, and then they get more snow as we move into the latter part of next week and beyond. While if we look in the interior over Russia and Siberia, not too much happening there. Rain and some snow as you go even further east. As far as the total snowfall is concerned over the 10-day period, now this is interesting. For some reason on the 16th day, you're seeing some snow in northern Spain, parts of France, and and back over in the Alps again. And that might be maybe some colder air coming into the equation here in the longer term. Let me look at the upper air. This is a learning experience for me. I'm trying to really gain an understanding about how things work. And you do have a very deep trough at the end of the period into Western Europe. But let me just see how we get there. This is a lot of fun, actually. Just trying to learn new stuff. So that's a pretty deep cutoff that we have at 156 hours. We're going backwards, and then we'll go forwards. I promise. Okay, so here we are for today. You can see the energy that comes in with the trough that moves into Western Europe on Friday night through Saturday night. Then it cuts off in a big way as it moves into the Mediterranean Sea. So that really explains the storminess there. And then that moves out, and you get another trough right behind it that cuts off. So there's actually a second storm as you go into the long range beyond day 7 and 8 before a ridge finally builds up into Western Europe. So it looks like for some areas a fairly active weather pattern going forward over with our friends on the other side of the Atlantic. So just bear with me, folks. Give me a little time, and I will become a little more nuanced and astute with how things work meteorologically speaking. You got to remember, when you're short range, local weather focused, you don't often get a chance to look at weather overseas. You do get to look at it across the country, but you still, even there, you give it kind of a cursory look to it. So let me just say hi to everybody. We are almost 19 minutes into this video before I said my first hello, and so we'll give a collective hi to all. Yankee Boy 7504, the European looks way better than the GFS and more believable. Well, I'm a little skeptical. All three models have three different looks to it, so I'm not really sure which way to go with this. Something European, the GFS was the first model yesterday to kind of change and go away from this idea of some kind of deeper low moving through the eastern states through the middle part of next week, and then the other models seem to follow that. So they caved fairly quickly. So I just kind of wonder whether, at least from the standpoint of the broader pattern, maybe the GFS has a slightly better idea for later next week. But you know what? I'm open. Let's say I'm agnostic about it at this point. Taco Bell, thank you for asking. A cat is not, was doing better last night. I went to see this morning. He's still at the vets. He's not doing very well. He's dehydrated. They're trying to get fluids into him, and you know, they fed him. They've given him his insulin, and I'm just hoping that he's 10 years old. I mean, he's still pretty young. But this I don't know what caused this this crash he's had in the last couple of days. This sort of came out of nowhere. So I'm kind of hoping he gets better fast, because I want him home. Thank you for asking. Yeah, unless Noah screwed up something, we're looking at a normal winter for the northeastern U.S. So I don't know. Well, you know what? I really wish we would get out of this warm pattern. If we're going to go to a warmer, you know, normal winter, we got to get the atmosphere to normalize. And we keep getting these, you know, these ridge popping up in the eastern states and warming things up. We got to get that to stop first. But I still think we're in an evolutionary process in terms of the overall pattern. I do like what I see in terms of what's going on in Canada, which is kind of opposite of the last 2 years. It is, you know, getting cold in Canada. The snow cover is increasing across much of Canada and down to the U.S. border. So I think that's a positive for those of you who want a cold and snowy winter. But, you know, there are no guarantees, by the way. There's no guarantee. There's nothing that says that it can't be cold with no snow. Just like we saw last year in the Northeast, it was warm with snow. It could also be cold with no snow. It could be cold and dry, kiss it goodbye. You know, there's no rule that says it can't be. And if James Raymond says a warm winter in Massachusetts because you want a warm winter there, and Javin Johnson, the Northeast having a warm winter. Well, look, if we do wind up with the third warm winter in a row, it would not be the first time. If you want to go back and look at statistics in the 70s, there were 70s, 80s, and 90s, there were streaks of 3, 4, 5 warm winters in a row. I mean, people are acting as if this has never happened before, and that's really just not the case. I keep pointing back, at least from the standpoint of if you look at New York statistics, if you look at Philadelphia statistics, if you look at New York City statistics specifically, and Philadelphia. The 1970s through the year 2000, those 30 years produced, it was the least amount of snow. Averages were more than 10 inches below average. New York City averages about 25 to 30 inches of snow in winter. Those winters average between 15 and 20. During the period from 2000 to 2016, particularly along coastal locations and on Long Island, the snow averages are running 10 or more inches above the long-term averages. So, you know, I don't know where there seems to be this expectation to develop that, you know, everybody seems to have these fake memories, because that's what they are, of these wonderful cold and snowy winters that Charles Dickens wrote. They just didn't exist. Okay, certainly they did not exist in the 30-year period from 1970 to 2000 in the Northeast, in the eastern, let's call it the northern mid-Atlantic and the southern areas of the Northeast. That might be a different story to some degree as you go further north, but at least for the standpoint of the area that I work with, that has, you know, this sort of winter fairy tale has developed. So let's see. Snow on the slopes in northern Vermont, says Kevin Francis, so that's good. Skiers may get a little early treat there. You know what? In the next couple of weeks, we're probably going to see something evolve that'll give us at least a hint of where we're going with all this. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. And Daniela Yakubov, yes, people do wish cast a lot. They do. And, you know, I guess it's human nature. I guess, you know, for the weather lovers out there, I could understand it, especially for you snow lovers. You know, I'm that way too. I love when it snows, and I have some very, very fond memories of the last 15, 16 years of some great snowstorms that occurred on Long Island, 20 inches or more, even 30 inches or more in one particular instance, and it was nothing like it. It was you know, a great meteorological experience. Maybe not necessarily about the most convenient experience in terms of traveling and so on, but it was certainly, you know, from a forecasting standpoint, from the challenge that was to actually watching it fall, it was quite amazing. But, you know, we'll see where it goes this year. The question is, will it be above average or ridiculously above average for their third year in a row? Well, Philip Hood, you know what? You're right. Maybe you're right. Maybe it will still be above average, but we saw last winter with above average temperatures, it's still in areas north of 40 degrees north at least, it did produce some above normal snowfalls. So if you've got the cold air when the systems are around, then you're going to get more snow. Otherwise, if it's cold and dry and you have all the cold air in the world, if you don't have a stormy setup in the upper layers of the atmosphere, you're just going to be cold and dry, kiss it goodbye. All right, folks, let's let it go here at this point. I hope everybody had a great Thursday. We're heading into Friday and the first weekend of the month of November, so I will be around, of course. So we've got live stream tomorrow about the same time, and then over the weekend the times are going to vary because I need a little downtime too. Okay, so check out meteorologistjoecioffi.com for all the latest website posts. And hey, if you've got Christmas shopping on your mind and you want to get your friend or yourself a Joe Stradamus mug or a T-shirt, you can go on my shopping site, which you can link from my Facebook page or from my website, or even from here at the end of the video. Later on, there'll be some links that show up. You can go right ahead. Feel no obligation. I'm just kind of putting it out there. But if you want a Joe Stradamus mug with the Boxing Day Blizzard on it, by all means, you can check those out and a few other things. So anyway, I appreciate all of you being here. Those of you who have hit the super chat, thank you very much as always. And in the meantime, make sure you have a great Friday and you enjoy your weekend. We will see you tomorrow.